Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Sharon Cook, and you are listening to the Procure Smarter podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, we are going to be talking to Mrs. Sarah Scudder, and she is a self-proclaimed supply chain nerd, and that is right up my alley. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, let me just say, if you are looking for a purchasing agency, please consider ProcureSmart. We are a boutique agency specializing in conversions, renovations, and new construction, and we would love to work with you on your next project. All right, everybody, stay tuned. Hi, everybody, we're back. We have Sarah Scudder with us. She is a self-proclaimed supply chain nerd, and that is right up my alley. Hi, Sarah, how are you?
Hello, it is looking like it's going to rain today, but it's supposed to snow tomorrow in Austin.
Is it
So
really?
if it happens, this will be my first snow ever in Texas.
That's amazing. All right, well, introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I am the Chief Marketing Officer at a supply chain technology company called SourceDay. Hence my color green. Green is our color, so I try to wear green all the time, and I'm building out my green wardrobe. So if you see green
Nice.
rain boots or purses or scarves, you'll know why.
Okay.
So I actually started my career planning on going into fashion. I wanted to actually produce runway shows and wanted to work for an agency and then eventually have my own company. I used to do runway in high school, and it just was really fascinating and interesting to me. So that was my vision and plan. And randomly, I wound up in supply chain. So my senior year, I was co-chairing a big philanthropic event for my sorority. It was kind of my last hurrah before I was graduating. And there was a ton of marketing related things that we needed to procure in order to put on this big production. I had two majors, a pretty crazy schedule, and I didn't really know how to source and procure things. So I hired a local company to buy all of the marketing related things that we needed. So that was media, that was swag, that was apparel, that was print, that was direct mail. And then they offered me a job after the event.
The dream, right?
And I thought to myself, this is as far away from fashion as possible. I barely knew how to spell procurement. I really had no idea what supply chain was. But I decided to actually take the opportunity. Probably the biggest reason was they were a very small company, and I thought I would be able to learn so much about business by working in a very small environment where I could learn about accounting and customer service and strategy and sales and marketing and all the different aspects of a business versus going and working for a much larger company. So I spent the first part of my career working in marketing procurement. So I was actually on the indirect side, helping companies buy technology and other marketing related items. Now, when I started doing this, marketing procurement was not very big. Marketing and procurement often didn't like each other. Procurement was kind of in their own world. Marketing drove revenue, reported directly to the CEO, and procurement and supply chain wasn't a big focus or priority for them. Mm-hmm. Well, after the pandemic hit, marketing procurement became a really, really big role and kind of a hot industry. Companies were actually creating marketing procurement positions and having a hybrid role where someone sat on the marketing and the procurement team to help marketing source and buy all the things that they need. So it's kind of fun to be in that space and watch the evolution of companies not even really prioritizing or knowing what it was into actually creating very high paid roles and positions and prioritizing spend and procurement for marketing. And then in October of last year, so just a few months ago, I actually accepted a job in a different part of procurement, which is actually in the direct spend space. So kind of a 180 and going into a different part of supply chain. So I am now running marketing for a company that helps organizations automate purchase order changes. So our big focus is now in the direct spend space.
Great. And I would love to talk about that. But first, let me say this was kind of a big move, right? I mean, this made news. I read several articles where it was announced that you took on this role.
Yeah, so I have lived in California my entire life, born and raised in the Bay Area, and went to school there, was not planning to make any big move. But when Source Day approached me, I just thought it was an incredible company and opportunity, and for me to learn a new part of procurement and supply chain that I think is really important, and there's going to be continued significant investment made in direct spend technology in the next few years. So yes, I packed up shop and moved to Austin. So I'm actually now a Texas resident. I have a Texas driver's license. So it's been a fun transition. And like I just mentioned, I have not lived through an Austin summer yet, but definitely experiencing very diverse weather. One day it's 70, the next day it's 30, and who knows, tomorrow it's supposed to snow.
That's crazy. Okay, so let's talk about the PO change automation. You had said on your LinkedIn, I believe, that 52% of purchase orders change after being issued. And as someone who has written thousands of POs, I can attest that that is true and creates a whole host of problems. So talk about the PO change automation that you are working on.
Yeah, so the two founders of our company both worked at different manufacturers, and they realized that they had full-time people on their teams that were dealing with all the changes that were coming in from their suppliers. Mm-hmm. And they thought, this is crazy that we are paying buyers $70,000+ a year to respond to emails and manually go into an ERP and update changes that have happened to a purchase order after they've been issued. And they thought there's got to be a better way to manage this process so we can have our buyers focused on more strategic activities for the company. So that's how they got the idea to create and build our platform, because they actually experienced it themselves when they were in manufacturing. So our platform was built to automate the changes that happen once a purchase order is issued from your ERP. So if I work in manufacturing, distribution, CPG, or retail, it's highly likely that I have purchase orders that have hundreds, or even in some cases, thousands of line items. And these line items are things like parts and materials. And when a change happens, if it's just one or two items, it's not a big deal. I can go back and forth a couple times via email. I can use a spreadsheet. I can go back into my ERP. But if I have a purchase order with 1,000, let's use 100 as an example, 100 line items, and 52 of those line items have changes. And by changes, I mean maybe it's a price change, a quantity change, a delivery date change. Maybe a supplier can't fulfill the whole order, but they can do a partial. When those changes happen, suppliers are sending emails. And if that is hundreds or thousands of emails, that takes a lot of back and forth for a buyer to communicate with the supplier. And then once the communication is done, manually go back into the ERP and make those changes. Now, another challenge not only is the manual work, but it's the risk associated with that. I can tell you, for me, if I was dealing with thousands of suppliers' emails every week, I would absolutely make a mistake.
Yes.
I would miss an email, I would forget, I would make a typo. Well, making one of those mistakes can have significant impacts to a manufacturer and could potentially shut down a production line. And when a production line is shut down, that's a significant revenue loss to a company. And there's lots of examples that I could use from clients, but I like to use the example of a 10-cent part. A buyer misses an email, production line gets shut down because they never got a 10-cent part.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth losing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars having a production line shut down because a buyer missed an email or made a typo from a supplier?
Right. Right.
So it's something that I think companies really, really need to look at. I know people are so busy and just so focused on getting through the day, but if there's a way to automate manual work to free up your team's time, it can not only help the company be more productive because your team members are focused on more strategic activities, but it's going to significantly reduce the amount of risk that is in your supply chain. And the other thing I'll say is there's a lot of buzz happening about last mile. So last mile is the last part of the supply chain process to get your products to the end customer. So that's air freighting your product from overseas, that's putting your materials on a cargo ship. And there's been so many issues. We hear about the last mile almost every day in the news. But what's ignored and shouldn't be is the first mile. The first mile is just as or more important than the last mile. Because if your first mile doesn't work, your last mile is not even relevant. And the first mile is actually getting the materials and parts from your suppliers that you actually need to produce product or fulfill orders.
Yeah, and that brings up two questions. One, I'm curious about this PO automation. In my world of FF&E, we are dealing with smaller orders but large dollar amounts. One PO could be $1 million, $1.5 million, but it may only be 20 line items. But a change to that line item can have a significant impact to the bottom line. And so, does it work on the same scale? Do you have to have thousands, or can you bring it down and work on a smaller scale?
Absolutely works on a smaller scale. So if you have a purchase order with just 10 or 20 line items, but it's $1 million purchases, it can absolutely, you can still gain benefit by automating those changes through a portal. So you're capturing all the data and information accurately. Because again, if there's a miss, even if there's only 5 or 10 line items, that can cost a company a significant amount of money. I call it fat fingering. If I'm going in and typing using Excel and I make a mistake, even though it's 1 or 2 line items, that can have really, really major impacts to the supply chain.
Yeah. And when I first started reading about this, the thing that came to my mind is I had a vendor one time that was notorious for redlining a PO. And I would send them a PO, and that PO would come back in 48 hours, and it would have like 30 changes. And some of them were minor changes, some of them were pricing, some of them were delivery, some of them were material. And if you just missed one change, it could throw off the whole PO.
That's exactly right. And then you may not want to approve all of those changes.
Right.
There you have your 30 red lines. Well, 5 or 6 of them may be a no-go. And if you don't have a portal where you're automating this communication, then that's manual. That's calling, that's emailing, that's continued back and forth instead of just saying, click, yes, this is approved, or no, this is declined.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about supply chain woes. I know, what are you seeing out there that other than the PO automation, what are you seeing right now that is creating the biggest struggle?
Yeah, so I'm gonna answer this in our world, which is in the direct space.
Mm-hmm.
I would say probably the biggest impact that we're seeing right now is companies not being able to get the parts and materials that they need to actually manufacture and produce those products. So they're having to get very, very creative about bringing stuff in-house. Maybe people can do some of their own manufacturing, expanding supplier basis. So instead of relying on one or two suppliers, needing to look at other suppliers, is there a way to tweak or change the product that you're producing so it doesn't necessarily need some of those parts or materials that you can't get? So I would say that's a major issue. And then the other issue is the freight and logistics piece that I talked about. So having visibility into when you're actually going to be getting the products. So let's say you place an order and someone tells you it ships, but you have no other visibility into that. That can cause huge problems because you don't actually know when you're going to be receiving your parts or products. And then you have the freight and logistics craziness on the last mile as well.
Right.
So once your materials are actually produced or you need to go and fulfill orders, actually getting those materials to your end customer. And I think this has huge implications, especially for e-commerce companies now, because it's so easy to lose a customer. If I go online to place an order and something tells me, yes, I have it and it's in stock, and then I don't get that product, I can very easily, in most cases, go on to another site and order that product from someone else. And I'm likely not going to go back to that original supplier since they didn't fulfill my order. So it's very, very important for e-commerce companies to be able to deliver on the promise of getting the product to the customer when they say they will, or communicating with that customer.
Right. Communication. I think in today's market where, warehousing, trucker shortages, container shortages, raw material shortages, if you just communicate to us and allow us to plan, it can minimize some of the stress.
Yeah. And then I would say another kind of challenge that we're seeing with companies is just the whole shift in mindset of being more open to leveraging and using technology to automate some of the manual work. So if you are somebody who's used to doing things a certain way, and you've been doing that process or system for a very long time, considering or being open to having technology replace that can be very scary, can be very overwhelming. So another, concern, I guess, or a challenge that companies are having is helping their teams be more open to leveraging and using technology to help them do their work.
I agree. This is not the time to get stuck in your ways. You really need to learn to pivot and pick up new skills.
And I think one of the things that is helping with that is the labor shortage. I mean, people can't fill positions. And so if you can't fill a position, what can you do? Maybe you can augment some of that with using technology. So I think that is a positive in pushing some companies to consider new processes and ways of doing things.
Right. Agree. Okay, let's talk about some of the other fascinating things that you're doing. Now, you run several shows on LinkedIn Live, right? So you have 3, I believe. Tell me about your shows. What makes them different, and what do you love about doing that?
Yeah, so I run 3 monthly LinkedIn Live shows, and purpose for them is twofold. One, I'm really, really passionate about elevating women in our industry. I'm excited that I see more women now in supply chain than I ever have before.
Yeah.
But I think there's a big opportunity to make supply chain cooler and more hip and encourage more people to pursue a career in supply chain instead of just accidentally falling into it like I did.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what it was. It wasn't even a consideration for me. So I'm hoping that some of my efforts will encourage people, especially younger in their careers, to actually pursue this as an industry. So my first show is Women in ERP, and I bring women on a panel every single month to talk about things they've experienced helping companies implement new ERPs, change management challenges, how they help companies with the selection process, when you should and shouldn't use an ERP. So all things ERP related. That's a female only panel show, which is really fun.
Yeah.
Then the second show that I host every month is called Manufacturing Woes. And the purpose of this show is to have people who have deep expertise in manufacturing come on and talk about their worst train wrecks and nightmares. So this is not a show where we come in and sugarcoat how awesome it is to work in manufacturing or how nothing ever happens and everything is perfect. I have people come on and tell their absolute crazy, can't believe it happened stories. And I think there's a lot that we can learn by the craziness and things that didn't go well for other people. So we can maybe help some people prevent those changes, those issues in their own careers.
Agree. But I bet that's a fascinating show. I mean, I just imagine like the stories you hear are probably so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot we can learn from other people's mistakes so we don't make them again, or if we have experienced them, how we can maybe overcome them quicker.
Right. And your third show.
And then the third show is a show that I host in partnership with ISM New Jersey. So that's part of the Institute of Supply Chain Management. And it's called Voice of Supply Chain. And each month I interview someone doing extraordinary things in the industry. And what I love about this show is we really, really talk about the personal journey. What was their childhood like? What influenced who they are today? What did they choose to go to college? Did they not? So I think it really is more focused on the person and the human experience versus just all about business. There's definitely a career twist and focus as well, but there's so many untold stories of people who have overcome and done incredible things in the industry. And this is an outlet for me to help people share their story.
Now, all three shows are very different. They have a different outlook. Is there one that you enjoy more than the other, or do you love them all equally? Are they like your children? You love them all equally?
I would say probably I've had probably the most fun with the Manufacturing Woes show, just because people are telling like absolutely absurd, crazy things that you wouldn't even imagine would happen in business. So I think probably the most fun and interesting stories have come out of that show so far.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out because now I want to hear them too. Okay, I have one last question for you. I saw that you are a huge Bradley Cooper fan. And go ahead.
So that is absolutely correct. I actually this wasn't planned. I didn't know you were going to be asking, but here is my cell phone case. I have a group of awesome friends that host a supply chain happy hour group that I've been a part of for a couple of years, and they sent this to me as my birthday gift. But I'm obsessed with Bradley Cooper. I'm planning to marry him.
Nice, big goals.
I found a Bradley Cooper LinkedIn profile that's not him, unfortunately, or I'd be tagging him in a lot of my supply chain content and posts. And I actually have a Bradley Cooper shrine at my house. So all my friends know that I love Bradley. So randomly Bradley Cooper gifts just arrive at my house. I have mugs, I have coloring books. My friend Susan Walsh sent me a cutout of Bradley. So yes, if you hear Bradley Cooper references or see Bradley Cooper stuff, think of me.
And I will do all I can on my end to support you in the Bradley Cooper love.
Step one is a dinner date.
Okay. We'll see how his wife feels about that. Oh, he's not married though, is he? No, he's not married.
Not
no,
married,
I was thinking
so
of Matthew
I'm in a good
McConaughey.
place.
Yeah. Okay. Then it's doable. We can make this happen.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Sarah, thank you very much for doing this with me. It has been fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording. All right, everybody, that was the wonderful Sarah Scudder. Her stories are so good. I cannot wait to check out Manufacturing Woes. I have my own stories I could share on that. Thank you guys for supporting the show. Stay tuned for next week. We have lots of great guests coming. All right, everybody, have a great week.